Good evening from New York. On his second trip to the Gulf Coast today since the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded, the current president did not tell anyone they were doing a heck of a job. Far from it. But with an oil spill that is already the worst in U.S. history, and with BP executives who are already warning we are still days away from knowing if their latest attempt to fix the gushing oil well has succeeded, President Obama may no longer need to lower expectations for what happens next. Ahead, a comment on what he can lift simply by rhetoric. In our fifth story, we begin tonight with the latest details. The president walking the beaches of Louisiana this afternoon to see and to feel firsthand the devastation now washing ashore. In Grand Isle, Louisiana, the president meeting with local officials, a planned 30-minute session turning into 2 hours of unloading. When he emerged, the president again insisting today that he is in charge.
I ultimately take responsibility for solving this crisis. I'm the president, and the buck stops with me. So I give the people of this community and the entire Gulf my word that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to stop this catastrophe, to defend our natural resources, to repair the damage, and to keep this region on its feet.
The president offering Gulf Coast residents a solemn pledge that they will be helped.
I am here to tell you that you're not alone. You will not be abandoned. You will not be left behind. The cameras at some point may leave. The media may get tired of the story, but we will not.
But despite the pledges of help and the words of comfort, Mr. Obama not avoiding the stark reality of the disaster.
This is a man-made catastrophe that's still evolving, and we face a long-term recovery and restoration effort. America has never experienced an event like this before.
Survivors of the explosion now testifying that their last moments aboard the oil rig were marked with chaos and an alarming breakdown in the chain of command. A 23-year-old crew member named Andrea Fleitas, who worked on the bridge, telling the Wall Street Journal that in the minutes after the explosion, she realized no one had used the emergency radio to call for help. Mayday, mayday, she said. This is Deepwater Horizon. We have an uncontrollable fire. She says the captain then reprimanded her, saying he had not authorized her to do that. Meanwhile, dozens of workers desperately trying to get off the burning rig, the lifeboats filling rapidly, some workers jumping directly into the oily water 60 feet below in the dark of night, yet again alarmed that no one had actually issued an order to abandon ship. Andrea Fleitas again choosing to act, announcing over the public address system, "We are abandoning ship." BP declining to comment on whether the chain of command broke down that night. The Wall Street Journal also reporting that because of the chaos, the button to activate the blowout preventer was not hit until minutes after the explosion because written safety procedures meant workers felt they had to wait till they got permission from a higher-ranking manager. So they waited. Meanwhile, the rig's chief mechanic testifying that the crew was often weeks, if not months, behind on preventive maintenance because the company that operated the rig, Transocean, had cut the engine room staff in half in a bid to save money. The chief mechanic's boss denies that charge. The company that owns the well, BP, today suspending its effort to plug the leak. It has now twice tried the operation known as the junk shot, pouring pieces of shredded rubber, golf balls, and other garbage into the crippled blowout preventer in a bid to clog the device. This in conjunction with the top kill maneuver, pumping drilling mud into the well. CEO Tony Hayward saying we must now wait 48 hours to see if it has worked. Mr. Hayward having said 48 hours ago that we would need to wait 48 hours. This is beginning to look like a recording. The science with Rick Steiner in a moment. First, the politics. Let's turn now to our own Lawrence O'Donnell, also, of course, a contributor to Huffington Post. Lawrence, good evening.
Good to be here, Keith.
Did today's trip to the Gulf succeed in doing anything that the White House might have wanted it to do?
I think it succeeded in some. It certainly addressed some of the more incoherent rantings against the president that we've heard from some political observers of this situation, as if the president was Iron Man or Jack Bauer or something, or some superhero who could go down there and do what science has been unable to do so far. And it definitely put him in that position of in effect, preacher-in-chief, telling people in reassuring tones that they will not be forgotten, that the federal government, led by him, will be doing everything possible on this. And that sort of reassurance, I think, is reasonable under these circumstances. And he did have this very difficult political course to walk today, wherein he's trying to deliver that reassurance, trying to keep the pressure on BP, and trying to all at the same time accept some kind of responsibility for the outcome of this entire event when we get to the final spot of the final cleanup moment.
But emphasizing, I don't think, in my analysis of this, the president has failed to do anything procedural or anything administratively or anything as an executive or anything as a chief executive. Is there a tipping point coming for the president in terms of separating himself from the abject failure aspect here? I mean, specifically BP's abject failure to handle this correctly at almost any point?
Well, this is the very difficult thing that he's now presented with, Keith. I think this question is really right on point. When the president has been forced now to politically step forward and accept responsibility, to declare himself to be the person who is finally and ultimately responsible for the outcome of what is in effect an industrial crime committed by BP, a crime of negligence, a crime of recklessness that begins with the homicide of 11 men on that rig that night and extends now into this spectacular, unprecedented devastation that we're getting some pictures of, but BP is restricting camera access to a great deal of what we really do need to see right now. With the president putting himself as the responsible one at the end of the line of all of the exercises that we have to go through now, it is going to be very difficult for him to, at the same time, disassociate himself where he's going to have to with some of BP's actions.
People have joked that image from the oil leak is on some sort of loop, and it is just repetitive video. My contention is that it's much more likely that the comments from Mr. Hayward, the CEO of BP, are on some sort of loop, and he just keeps repeating himself. It's now another 48 hours and another estimate of success that's 60 to 70%. Why is anybody listening to what Mr. Hayward says anymore?
Well, of course, all of his pronouncements should begin with, I don't know what I'm doing. We've never been here before. We never expected to be here because much of our BP bureaucracy has, in effect, lied over the years about what the possibilities were in these kinds of circumstances. BP actually had a letter that went out to the federal government saying that basically that this kind of thing couldn't happen on its wells in the Gulf. And so, and luckily, we don't have to trust Hayward anymore. We have, I think, almost enough people looking over his shoulder. We have enough of our own governmental presence down there now, state, local, federal. And of course, BP has absolutely no credibility. It's a little bit peculiar when you look at it and you wonder, why is Hayward even going and stepping up to a microphone? Who does he expect believes him at this point? Certainly not the families of the 11 dead in this one.
Lawrence O'Donnell of MSNBC and the Huffington Post. It seems odd to say under the circumstances. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Keith.